That's right. It is a great day out here. Woo! Happy New Year, everyone. Happy 2022. Oh my gosh, I can't even believe it's 2022. And this is our first recording of the new year. And gosh, I'm just honored to bring you this show today. Do we have a great show for you in store today? We really hope you enjoyed our last show. It was a super special show for me to do to really help my good friend Miranda search for a kidney. She is a young mom who's been on dialysis for years on end. And if you missed that show, please go back and take a peek. Support her. Please spread that show. Please spread the video. Please share the podcast with anyone you know. And please help share the gift of life. Today, gosh, we have beautiful Holly Francis with us. Holly is an incredible survivor of Guillain-Barré syndrome, which is a very rare neurological disorder that can cause severe weakness and even paralysis, believe it or not, lasting up for weeks, sometimes even years. Believe it or not, amazing Holly, who you see before us today, spent a lot of time in the ICU. She then had to learn how to relearn how to walk, and she now amazingly serves as a personal trainer to help others find their strength and to really live their best lives with the gift of today. She's the author of Happily Ever After, and she really represents every single thing that we strive to bring you here on the Rise Today Inspirational Podcast, where we strive to bring you tools of resilience to overcome your own adversities, to bounce back higher than ever before. Holly emulates this in every single way. Welcome to the show, Holly.
Thank you so much, Erica. I am so excited to share my story with you and with your listeners today.
We are just so happy to propel your energy with my audience. I'm so happy to have you here. Really, you have inspired me. I follow you on social media, and this is how we connected, was on Instagram. And I love what you do and the message that you propel. So I am very excited to have you with us today. Like I said, you are just a shining example of everything we do here on the show. So welcome.
Thank you so much.
Okay, Holly, can you take us back to, your previous life? Before Guillain-Barré set in, tell us what Holly was doing at that point.
So at that time, I was in my early 20s and life was really good and life was going according to plan. I had recently just gotten married and then we planned to have a baby and I got pregnant really quickly. And life was just, honestly, it was just going perfect for me. And I just felt so blessed. I found out that I was having a little girl. And which was like my dream come true. I had literally been thinking about being a mother since I was like 3 or 4 years old. So
did you feel well in the early pregnancy?
I did. I had a fantastic pregnancy. Okay. I was very fortunate and I didn't have any morning sickness at all. And I just felt like so happy and I was just so excited, especially when I found out I was having a little girl. My pregnancy went completely smooth. And when she was ready to come out, I was just like, okay, my life, we're ready. We're ready to start my life and just make all these memories together. And so I was 26 when my daughter was born. Okay. And like I said, I was just so excited to start my maternity leave with her. So in Canada, we get a year. And so I had a whole year ahead and I was excited to go do some mommy and me classes. I registered us for, and we were going to go for walks and I made all these plans. So I was working at the time in human resources. And so I was already on my mat leave when she had arrived. And like I said, I was excited about my future because I was young and I felt like I had my entire life ahead of me. And I was healthy. I had never had any health problems before that. So like I said, I was 26, feeling like I was on top of the world. I had a career, I had a husband, I had my baby, and everything was going according to plan.
So you're climbing this ladder of life and loving life. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I got diagnosed with Guillain-Barré syndrome.
So what were you feeling to lead to that diagnosis? What did you start to notice?
So it happened really quickly. It happened about 3 weeks after my daughter was born. And like I said, before that, I was completely healthy, no issues. And then when I was at home with my daughter, we were hanging out on the couch and I was bouncing her up on my knee. and I felt a really weird tingle in my fingertip. And at the time, I didn't realize that that was actually my first symptom until months later. But that was the first symptom, and that was basically nerve pain in my finger. And I forgot about it, didn't think it was anything. And then only a couple hours later, I started to get weak legs. And I kind of felt tired, like maybe I had the flu, or maybe I was just not sleeping well. I mean, I had a newborn that was waking up all the time.
Sorry, Holly, you said a couple hours, not a couple days, not a couple weeks. You said a couple hours after this little tingling that you first felt.
Yes. So
Wow.
my case progressed very quickly. So within, like I said, a couple hours, weakness in my legs. So I had brought my daughter up to bed, and I really noticed that I was struggling to get up the stairs. Tucked her into bed and went back downstairs. And I'm talking minutes from this point, I got a really bad pain in the very back of my neck. And I didn't know what it could be because I had slept fine. I wasn't exercising or anything. So, and it was sudden and very sharp. So I'm thinking, okay, well, maybe this isn't the flu. Like, why am I having trouble walking up the stairs? Why do I have this pain? And I Googled it, of course, and Dr. Google told me that I had a pinched nerve. So
Right.
I'm thinking, okay, I've got a pinched nerve. And the pain just got worse and worse in my neck.
Dr. Google can be very dangerous.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes,
Absolutely.
yes.
So I'm thinking this is a very severe pinched nerve, and the pain is getting worse and worse in my neck. And I'm thinking I think I need to go to a doctor, like right now, even though it was like 8 o'clock at night in the middle of winter. It was like -30. So I drove myself to the Medi Center. I told my husband I'll be right back. And I went to the Medi Center, and he looked me over and he said, yeah, I think it is a pinched nerve. I think you're right. So I'm going to tell you, or I'm going to give you a prescription for some pain meds, and you can go see a physiotherapist.
Can I ask a question? He thought it was a pinched nerve, even though both your legs were weak?
Yes.
Okay.
To be honest, he didn't really look me over.
Okay. That's got to be a hard swallow.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, in their defense, Guillain-Barré syndrome is very rare, and it's not something that they're looking for. So in their mind, they're looking for whatever the most obvious scenario is, and that seemed like it. So
at this point, you check the doctor.
Yep.
You're sure you've got this pinched nerve. You leave the doctor's office. It's nighttime. You go home.
I go home, and not even an hour later, the pain is 10 times worse, and I'm almost in tears. And in my head, I'm still thinking it's a pinched nerve, and I'm thinking I need to get in to see a physiotherapist tomorrow. So I took some pain meds, and I crawled into bed with my husband. My daughter was in her bassinet beside us, and I'm laying there, and I'm just in so much pain, and I'm like, I need to massage my neck and do stretches. And so I'm on Google, and I'm sitting on the floor in my house or in my bedroom, and I'm Googling stretches and exercises and anything I can do for pinched nerve pain, and nothing is helping. And then I did this for several hours. And then at 3 a.m, my daughter started crying because she woke up and she needed to eat. And I stood up from the floor, and when I stood up, my knees buckled and I fell back down, and I could hardly even stand. So at that point, it was like, okay, this is serious. If this is a pinched nerve, then it's a very serious one. So I think I need to go to the hospital. So I woke up my husband at the time and told him what was going on. And he was supposed to go back to work the next day because he was on mat leave, or he was on paternity leave. Because my daughter, I mean, she was only 3 weeks old. So he was at home still with us. And I'm like, you need to take me to the hospital. And he's like, well, you need to stay with Casey so that you can feed her. And so I can go to work. I got to be at work in a few hours. And I'm like, well, I'm in so much pain. I need to go now. So he dropped me off at the hospital because I thought I would be fine. And I figured I'm just going to get some pain meds and then I'll come home. So I'll call you in a couple hours. And within 72 hours. So basically, when I went into the hospital, I saw a doctor that I was very fortunate that he was like, something is wrong. Your weakness is quite severe. I was losing the ability to use my hands. And my legs were getting weaker and weaker to the point where I was like dragging myself along.
Okay, just pause for a sec. This must have been so scary.
It was terrifying. And I think at the time, like I kept lying to myself, telling myself that it's going to be okay. It's just a pinched nerve. I just need to get some meds or whatever they're going to do for me, and then they'll fix me and I'll be fine. And I'll be home in an hour or two. And that's what I kept thinking. And it was terrifying for sure. But the doctor that I seen was very smart man. And he said, I don't know what's wrong with you. I have no idea, but somebody's going to know. So I'm going to call some specialists and they're going to come downstairs to see you. And the specialist that I saw,
I have to say, I really honor that. I've been in that situation too, right? Where I'm in the ER and my case is so complicated, from having terminal leukemia, bone marrow transplant, a double lung transplant, kidney failure. I mean, you name it, all the stuff that's arisen from this crazy leukemia diagnosis. And I show up in the ER for something random and I've had doctors freeze, just like what you're saying, right? And one came up the next day after I was admitted and he was like, gosh, I'm so happy to see you doing so much better. And I'm so sorry. I acknowledge I froze. I just didn't want to do anything to make you worse. And then more recently, I was there again. And the doctor said, you know what? I only know what I know. And this is beyond what I know. And do you know how much I admire that?
Absolutely.
Rather than saying, yep, this is a pinched nerve and I've got this, just the honoring our lack of knowledge in certain areas. I really respect that in the medical profession. I find it rare though.
Absolutely, it is rare, and I think we need more of that they don't know everything. They certainly, they try to know as much as they can, and they certainly are trying to help us as much as can, but
of course,
they don't know it all. So
thank you, Chapman. Thank you for being here. Woohoo! Happy New Year to you too. This is a very inspirational story. Stay with us for this one. This is a good one. Nice to have you with us, Chapman. So they call in the specialist, Holly.
So the specialist comes down and he'd seen a case of Guillain-Barré syndrome before and said, I think I know what you have. And I asked him what it was. And he said, let's wait till we get the test results back first, which was a little terrifying. And he told me, you need to call your family. They need to come here. This is very serious, if that's what it is, but it is what we believe. I had a spinal tap to basically test the fluid in my spine. And once we got the test results, I was diagnosed with Guillain-Barré syndrome. And
how overwhelming was this? You're now getting a spinal tap. Like, how overwhelming is this?
I had never even heard of Guillain-Barré syndrome before. I couldn't even pronounce it at the time. And I mean, I'm 26, so I'm thinking well, what is this? And what does that mean? And oh, by the way, I have a newborn at home. I got to get home.
Of course.
And they're saying, well, we don't really know what's going to happen for sure. We just know that that the paralysis or the weakness could progress to paralysis. And you need to be monitored in the hospital. So you're going to need to stay here for a little while. And so again, I'm still lying to myself still telling myself, okay, well, I just need to get medicine. I just need to be seen by doctors, treated, and then I'm going to go home. And like I started to say before, within 72 hours, the paralysis spread through my body completely like wildfire and spread up past my diaphragm until I could no longer breathe. And I had to be intubated and rushed to ICU.
Wow. So I have to say, I don't actually think that you're lying to yourself. And I feel like we have this self-protective, self-preserving, wisdom within us that we can't deal with those emotions at the time, right? It would be too overwhelming for us to deal with that emotion and survive and go through all the steps we need to do so. Right. Absolutely. Because I know this from personal experience too. I remember when I was diagnosed with AML, leukemia, I was literally standing in the aquarium with my two babies. We had just literally walked in the door. Right. And I got a call from a lab I had just done. And they're like, is this Erica Harris? You need to go to the nearest emergency. You need to avoid all public places. And I was like, no, like, I'm totally fine. Like, you've got the wrong girl. Like, you mixed up the labs, and I lost connection and I didn't check messages again that day. I went off on a picnic. I did all this stuff. Right. And later that night I got home and, my husband was like getting all these messages. And he was like, I can't believe you didn't check the messages. And I was like, no, it's just a mistake. Like, they have somebody else. Right. And they mixed up the labs and I'm perfectly healthy. Like, I was at the most public of public places and look at me, I'm doing just great. Right. And, and then even after I was diagnosed, I'm in the hospital and I considered this to be a blip, like a complete blip on the path. I was entertaining 60 guests every day in my hospital room. Like, what can I get you? Ice or no ice from my water fountain? Come watch me on my exercise bike. right? This is just a blip. I'll be out of here in no time. Can you help out with some meals in the family? Can you like just autopilot, complete autopilot, right? But I really think, one of my heroes, Dr. Gabor Mate, talks a lot about trauma and how the traumatic experience happens, but the trauma is actually how we push down those emotions.
Absolutely.
Right? It's the wisdom of trauma that we push down those emotions as a self-preserving mechanism so that we can actually survive as we cope in those initial phases, right? So I don't even think you're lying to yourself so much. I do think it's like this internal wisdom that we have within us that protects us and preserves us in these hugely traumatic events.
Yeah. And even when the doctor was telling me, like, you're gonna need to have treatment here at the hospital, we don't know how severe your case will be, but there are cases where people have to learn how to walk again. They're at a hospital for a very long time. And even then I was thinking, that's not going to be me. Right. I'm only 26. I've always been healthy. I'm going to get the medicine and it's going to work. And then I'm going to go home and I'm going to be fine. And obviously being intubated, and I realized that things were going downhill very, very quickly. So it happened within 3 days that I was in ICU, breathing on a ventilator. By that time, I was completely paralyzed. So the paralysis had spread all the way throughout my entire body. I could no longer move anything.
Oh my gosh.
I could no longer speak. I had a tube in my mouth at first. Later, they moved it to my throat. And I couldn't do anything. And I realized, like, my life was just, everything had changed in the blink of an eye. So I had my daughter, and all of a sudden I was paralyzed on life support, struggling to breathe, struggling to do anything. And I couldn't talk. I couldn't move. I couldn't say I love you to my daughter. And I felt like my life was just completely over.
And it's the simplest things like that we totally take for granted each and every single day with our health, with our wellness, with the gift of being alive. You had to relearn how to walk, right? Absolutely. How many of you out there said, gosh, I'm just thankful for my ability to walk today, right? And I had to relearn how to breathe. Who forgets how to breathe?
Yeah.
Who can't breathe, right? I had to relearn how to breathe. Who has given thanks today for the gift, the simple gift of breath, right? And I remember when I was diagnosed, I remember I looked out the window and I saw this woman. It was in the downtown of Vancouver. And this woman was walking in the downtown corridor below. It looked like she was walking home from work. She had professional attire on and these little sneakers on underneath. And she was walking with all this like vim and vigor, and she was saying hello to everyone she met. She had long dark hair like you, but it was in a ponytail and it bounced with every step she took as she said hello to everybody. And I looked at her as I was hearing the words of my diagnosis, and I could hear what was happening in this room. My husband was asking a bunch of rampant questions as any caring husband would, right? And I could kind of hear, but it was like a slow motion, twisted, tainted video, right? And my head turned, my gaze focused all on her, completely on her. And I envisioned I was her again, walking home from work, going to cook a family meal for my family, walking with all that same vim and vigor, right? And I wanted to be her desperately, just going home to make a family dinner for my family. The gift of cooking dinner, right? All these powerful things that we don't see the power in until we're lying in that ICU bed, until that opportunity is taken away. It's the gift of the mundane. It's the gift of walking. It's the gift of these simple moments. So I hope this really connects with our audience today. Don't wait to appreciate the mundane until you've had an experience like Holly or myself have had. Powerful. Thank you for that, Holly.
Absolutely. So yeah, I mean, I'm in ICU and I'm feeling like my life is over, and they gave me treatment that was meant to hopefully speed up my recovery, but it doesn't always work in that moment. Sometimes you don't see progress for quite a while. And my case ended up being very severe. I was completely paralyzed for 6 weeks before I even moved anything again. So, I mean, people are running around my room and carrying my daughter. My husband at the time brought my daughter every day to be there with me, and she's weeks old. And so he's putting her on my chest and trying.
You can't actually hold her. Can you move your arm to hold her?
I could not move my arms. No, I couldn't move anything. At one point, my paralysis was so severe that all I could do was blink my eyes. So I communicated by using a communication board, basically like an 8x10 piece of paper with letters written across it. And my family would point to the letters that I wanted them to use, and then I would blink my eyes. And so that's how I communicated for a while. Then they moved the tube from my mouth into my throat. And so I could mouth words, which made things a little bit easier. My family had to learn how to read my lips.
Of course.
But it was.
We say though, we can communicate with our hearts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My paralysis, like it continued to stay there, and I felt like I was never going to get better. And the doctors kept telling me Guillain-Barré syndrome, it's an autoimmune disorder where your body attacks the nerves. And once the attack is finished, your body should start to recover and the paralysis should fade. But I didn't believe them just because it wasn't happening. And for 6 weeks, I lay there completely paralyzed, wondering, am I ever going to get out of this, and feeling completely lost and broken and really angry at the world because this had happened to me so soon after giving birth. And I felt like my entire life was just thrown away and I would never get the chance to be the mother that I always wanted to be and spend time and make memories with my daughter.
Did you let yourself feel this anger?
I did. I absolutely did.
This is what we want to talk about too, because we were just talking right about the wisdom of trauma. And trauma isn't the event. Trauma is the act of pushing down these emotions, right? And there's a wisdom, like we were just talking about, like Dr. Gabor Mate preaches, right? There's this wisdom of trauma. But then, after we're out of that immediate flight or fight mode, right? Holly's now cared for. She's in the ICU. She's getting all the care. It's now in the aftermath, right? And in those recovery days. If Holly had then continued those survival mechanisms of pushing down that trauma, that would continue to be trauma for her, right? And after that flight or fight mode is the time that we really need to express those emotions. Those emotions serve us. That anger helps to propel our fight. That sadness helps us to reflect. Those emotions really serve us. And when we continue to push them down, we don't actually affect the behavioral change that then comes from those emotions that we're trying to get, right? And that we're trying to create that change. So Holly's now letting herself experience those emotions, which takes so much courage to be in the ICU and to be like, I'm just mad. Yes, I'm alive, but like I am mad, right? And that is so fair. And that is such an important part of this process because like you heard, everyone, you just heard Holly say, she was like climbing this ladder of life. She's got her beautiful baby. She's so excited about living this life she's living. She has a year off work. She's just so happy with her beautiful little family. And in the blink of an eye, she's then in the ICU, intubated, paralyzed, not able to speak, not able to hold her baby. Be grateful for your health, for your wellness, for everything today, and live today fully, fully, fully.
Absolutely. And like you said, I was so angry at the world. And it was really hard for me because everybody was around me, holding my baby and kissing her and talking to her. And I'm jealous and wanting that.
Yes.
And wanting to get out of there. And everyone's telling me I'm going to get better, but I'm not getting better. But eventually I did. And it started with a very tiny flicker of my fingertip. That was the first movement that we got. And my family was so thankful and grateful and happy, but it was hard for me. And I was like, well, it's just a finger moving.
Yeah.
But I learned that I did need to focus on every tiny improvement, no matter how small, because progress is progress no matter what. And tiny progress is what leads to a recovery, right? So
small, simple steps. And I always say to celebrate the small wins because that is what keeps motivation high. So if Holly went from, this is just like a little finger twitch, I want to be able to walk, she would stay in this zone of being frustrated, of being angry, right? But if we switch our perspective to be like, shoot, my finger just moved. That is pretty cool after 6 weeks of not moving everything or anything, right? Like it's these small, simple steps, and celebrating the wins of those small, simple steps can keep motivation high, no matter your situation and no matter how high the mountain you have to climb.
Yeah. And I tried to keep going and I tried to be strong. But it was just so hard. I was going through severe, severe pain. I was on heavy narcotics, so I was very out of it a lot. And I was also very sick from all the medications. So I was nauseous and throwing up a lot. And it was torture. It was like being in hell
Did
every
you have
day.
hallucinations in the ICU?
I did, yes, for quite a while. So that was another thing I was dealing with. And so it was just horrendous. And every minute was like hell. And I was trying to get through, but just not knowing how I could possibly handle another minute. And they're saying might be there for weeks. And so it was just so traumatizing for me. And my mom actually, and the hospital as well, they ended up finding or having a GBS patient who had recovered, and he actually came to the hospital to see me. And he walked in completely healthy, and he's like, I had GBS and I completely recovered. And that was a really big turning point for me, obviously, to see that this man who actually was in the same hospital room as I was, who had a 6-month-old when he had GBS as well, that he was completely recovered, running around with his daughter, living life as if GBS had never even happened. And he was on a ventilator as well for 3 months.
I love this, Holly. I love that you just brought this up, because this is such an important part of resilience, right? To seek out and to find those inspirational role models.
Absolutely. Find somebody that is even a few steps ahead of you.
Yeah, for sure. And I experienced the exact same experience as you did, because in the face of my diagnosis with leukemia, just 3 weeks after I had been diagnosed, the first round of chemotherapy I was told would have an 80% chance of success, that did not work. And I only grew sicker. And they told me that I would need a round of salvage chemotherapy, followed by a bone marrow transplant. And this sounded brutal to me. I was still nursing my youngest son. This sounded absolutely brutal. I wasn't still nursing. I was hospitalized. But when I was diagnosed, I'd still been nursing him, right? Like it was the same thing, life interrupted, right? And I was like, this sounds brutal. This treatment regime, you're telling me, show me somebody who has had this same treatment regime and that's thriving on the other side. I need to see this, right? That they're actually thriving. And so it's very rare to find someone who's had salvage chemotherapy, because it's the most aggressive chemotherapy out there. And you have to be very fit to be eligible to get this salvage chemotherapy. So my team was amazing. They rummaged through all their records, right? And they found this beautiful woman, Mary. Mary came to see me on a day that I had been in septic shock, sick as sick can be, right? Feeling like I can't even begin to describe. Still chemo draining in. I mean, you name it, right? Just terrible day, as bad as it can be. She came into my hospital room, and it was like the sun was shining on her in the door as she walked in, right? And she was very hesitant as she walked in, and she introduced herself very slowly. And she sat next to my bed, and she sat really close to me, and, really a lot of heart and a lot of empathy. And she looked at me and she said, I know that you don't feel like any part of you is left inside. And it's exactly what I was feeling, right? Where am I in all of this? Like, all my power has been taken away. I'm just a shell of what I used to be, And she said, I know exactly how you feel, but just hold on, stay the course. And I promise you will come back to you. I can't even begin to tell you. She talked about potatoes when she was finally out of the hospital, how tired she was cutting potatoes for dinner, at first, and now how she can make a whole meal, right? And I was just like, you could follow that progression, right? And then she was leaving my room. And when I was 35 at the time, and when she went through this same treatment, she was 45 and she had children. And now she was 60, maybe 65 at the time. And she was leaving after my hospital visit with me. She was leaving to go meet her firstborn grandchild. And for me, that was so powerful. Mm-hmm. I instantly saw myself, right, when I'm 80, as this fit little granny pushing my future grandbabies, no pressure to my kids, but down the Ambleside seawall here in Vancouver, right, West Van, and pushing my little grandbabies in the seawall. These inspirational role models can help us stay the course. They can help us hold on. And we have to be super proactive in seeking those out and in finding those. So that's amazing that he came to see you.
Absolutely. And I love what you said, like she just glowed, because that's what it was like for me.
Yeah.
when
It's
he
like
walked
they're
into the
angels.
room.
It's like they're angels on our paths, angels amongst us. I really believe that. I needed her to come in that day. I needed her so that I could hold on and I could create a new vision for myself in the future of cutting potatoes as I did last night for dinner. So anyhow, that was powerful. So so tell us, how are you getting on your climb back?
So at the time, like I'm moving my finger and then they're telling me, okay, you got to get off the ventilator soon and we're going to wean you off. And they started off with 15 seconds and it felt like I was running as fast as I could, a marathon that I had never trained for. And I struggled to breathe and I'm struggling for air and I feel like I'm drowning and I'm begging them, please put the valve back on. And they're like, okay, well, you're going to have to do this and you're going to have to practice for several weeks. And it was terrifying because it was like I wasn't able to breathe and they were expecting me to try to breathe on my own. And it just felt so impossible. And the man that had come to see me, he had gone through all the same thing. And he brought a sign for me. It's actually behind me on the wall, but it says, courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's the quiet voice saying, I will try again tomorrow. So he taped that to my wall in front of me. And he said, when you're doing your breathing trials, you can always look at that. And so I literally just stared at that sign for every single trial I did. And I lasted 15 seconds and then I lasted 30 seconds and then I lasted a minute. And this went on over weeks, several weeks. And I remember every time that I would cry afterwards because it was so exhausting and it made me nauseous and it made me feel like I was going to die. I felt like I wasn't going to be able to catch my next breath. So it was very traumatizing. And I would
there's nothing like that feeling. And I know that well of not being able to breathe. And it feels like you're drowning. It feels like you're drowning alive. Yeah.
Yeah. So I kept looking at that sign and saying, okay, well, I can always try again tomorrow. I can always just try again tomorrow. And so that's what I did. I promised myself, okay, no matter how hard today is, I can always try again tomorrow. So I kept doing that. And over time, those seconds and then minutes turned into hours. And then I was able to do 6 hours and then I did 12 hours and it progressed until finally after weeks and weeks, after over 3 months in the hospital, then I was finally able to completely breathe on my own. They took out the trach from my throat and I left ICU.
Wow. Wow. And how did that feel walking out of ICU?
That was a huge turning point for me. I would like to point out, I certainly did not walk out of there. I was still mostly paralyzed at the time. And so at first I was a little bit frustrated because in my head, I was thinking, okay, when I get out of ICU, I'm going to get back to my life. But it wasn't the case. I was still mostly paralyzed. I was regaining movement in my hands a little bit, but I couldn't feed myself. I couldn't move. I was still pretty much mostly paralyzed. And so I realized, okay, well, I'm better, but I'm not quite better. And I still have a long way to go before I'm actually independent again.
Did you go straight from the ICU to home?
No, I went to a neurology ward.
Yeah. A rehab ward?
Yeah.
Or was it? Okay.
Yeah. So it was basically the stroke and neurology ward. Yeah. So I moved to that ward. And like I said, at first I was very, okay, well, like I've got a long way to go. But at the same time, I also realized what I had just accomplished, which was breathing on my own. And that was something that I had told myself at one point, it's impossible. I can't do this. I'm never going to be able to do this. And then I could, and I proved myself wrong. And so from there, I just kind of knew like, okay, it's time. It is time to work my ass off and get back to my baby. And that's when I went into strict, intense physiotherapy. I learned how to move my hands again, how to hold cutlery, how to drink from cup, how to feed myself eventually. And all this took time and a lot of work and a lot of physiotherapy and several exercises that I had to do multiple times.
A lot of patience. It sounds like.
A whole lot of patience because it didn't seem like it was happening fast enough for me. And I was always asking, when am I going to get better? Why am I not getting better? And I was, though. And I really had to focus on every tiny improvement that I made. Like the first time I sat up in a wheelchair when my core was finally strong enough to hold me up. And then eventually I was strong enough to stand, and I stood for three times for 10 seconds at a time. And I did that progressively over time. And then eventually I was able to walk against these parallel bars, these silver bars that I had to hold on to for dear life. And I walked with my therapists all surrounding me, holding on to my waist. And then from there, I progressed to walking with a walker, and I practiced with that, and just continuously, or every step that I made got me closer and closer to eventually I learned how to walk completely on my own. And I went home when my daughter was almost 6 months old. It was after 126 days in the hospital.
Wow. Wow. Hard, and I remember I had to grieve the loss, and that was part of those, those survival mechanisms that we were talking about bearing those emotions, right? And going into the hospital and being ripped away from my family. And at first I was like, yep, just a blip on the path.
Mm-hmm.
But those 4 white walls of my hospital room, it was those walls that would hear the silent tears and would witness those silent tears that I would weep every night. And, grieving the loss of missing my oldest, his 5th birthday party, and being abruptly halted from missing or nursing my youngest, and missing my youngest go through his first little sprinkler, and all these tiny little moments, and, having to stream in. My friends took over the birthday party, which was amazing for my oldest, but having to stream in from the hospital, I mean, brutal on so many fronts. This party that I had planned for so many months before, and all the little firsts with going to kindergarten, and it was just so hard. I had to allow myself that safe space to grieve all of those losses. And I'm sure you too had to allow yourself the space to grieve those 126 days that you missed of those beautiful, precious, tiny baby days, right?
Yeah, and for a while there I was quite sad and angry that I lost out on so much time with her. I never got to go to those mommy and me classes. They'd already finished. Right. I never took her for her first walk. Her dad did that. I never got to see her first smile. I lost out on breastfeeding. I only breastfed her for the first 3 weeks of her life. And then after that, I wasn't able to anymore. So I was very upset for a while that I lost out on that life. But then on the other hand, I was just so grateful. Once I was home, I'm like, I can breathe again, and I can walk again, and I can do all these things that at one point I pleaded for. And I would lay in my hospital bed and go, I just want to be better. And now I was. And so that was a really big turning point as well for me, to, instead of look back and be angry at what happened and frustrated that I lost out on so much time with my daughter, that I could turn it around and turn it into something beautiful, and that we were going to make up for the lost time, and we were going to go out and do all these things, and we were going to make memories together, and we were going to continue on with our lives because we finally could.
That's beautiful. I love that. And so now you're serving as a personal trainer. It's amazing. And you help others find their strength.
Yeah. So after I got out of the hospital and I was recovering, and I mean, I wasn't back to normal. I was still very weak, and I had to do more physiotherapy outside of the rehab hospital several times a week. And I just slowly got a little bit stronger and a little bit stronger. And I went to this one specific physiotherapist. And I remember at the time he had said, like, how are you doing? Are you, like, your walking is not 100%, but do you want to try to run? And I was like, you know what? I'm not really a runner. Like, I don't really care. So I think we're good. Like, I don't think I need to push myself any further. And he was just like, okay, well, don't you want to be 110%? Don't you want to be able to play tag with your daughter and just
love that physiotherapist?
I know, me too. And so I was like, you know what? Yeah, I do. And I want to be able to do all these things. And I want to be able to do things that maybe I never even thought I wanted to do, like climb a mountain and run a marathon and that kind of stuff. So I said, well, let's try. And so I went to the physiotherapy sessions 3 times a week, and we did, I think it was about 12 weeks or so. And from the beginning to the end, it was like night and day difference. And I was just blown away by the progress that I made and how much stronger I was. I was like in the best shape of my life. And so from there, I just continued on. I bought myself a pair of pink runners and I started running. And then I got a gym membership. And I just continuously said, like, I can just try again tomorrow. I can just keep pushing, keep seeing how I go, and just never giving up on myself, even if it means I need to rest and take breaks and all that. But I just kept going. And eventually I was in the best shape of my life. I got certified because I just found such a passion in fitness and how much better it makes you feel. And
Certified as a personal trainer.
and got into personal training.
That's amazing. I love this. I'm so proud of you. That's incredible. I want to talk a little bit though, because as young moms, right, we put all of our emphasis and all of our focus into the health and wellness of our babies, right? Even in the pregnancy, we're all focused 100% on our babies, right? And this idea of self-care, I just want to remind our whole audience to tune in on, right? Because I think myself too, as a mom, everything I focused on was on my children, right? And as I say on the airplane, we have to put our own mask on first, and we have to prioritize our own self-care ahead of anything, really, because who knows, autoimmune diseases, as you experienced, or cancer, right? We need to take care of ourselves. We both endured what we've endured as young moms, right? And I think we both slipped probably on our self-care a little bit, moving up to that point, right? And emphasizing the self-care that you and I both do now, right, is so important for others to do proactively.
Absolutely. And I know before before I had GBS, I wasn't active. It wasn't a part of my lifestyle. And then afterwards, and getting into exercise and realizing how much better I felt. And I was dealing with residuals such as nerve pain and severe fatigue. And I realized that by exercising every day, it was giving me energy and it was making my pain less. And it was just making me feel better overall, especially for my mental health as well. And I love what you said. Like, it's so true that it was like, in order for me to be the best mom that I could be, I had to put myself first.
Yeah. And I personally, on my journey, I had always lived this life passionate about health and wellness, right? So I've always been fit. I had always been very conscious of the food that I had consumed, right? Of top quality, organic, like non-processed, right? But for me, I had never given any consideration to the idea of mindfulness or meditation, or I lived this autopilot life of go, 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 right? Feeling my sense of purpose was always doing, right? And for me, the whole self-care portion that I needed to focus on was the opposite, and calming my mind and focusing on all of those tools of mindfulness. So whatever area of self-care we need to work on, we just need to carve out that time for ourselves, take a bath, go for the run, right? Whatever it is that reconnects us with us and is the area that we need to change in our environment, we need to do so and carve out that time consistently, and don't feel guilty about it. That's your time. Yeah. For your health and your wellness and your longevity for your family. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Holly, can you share some lasting words of wisdom with our audience, please?
I think just never giving up on yourself, no matter what hard thing that you're going through. I know, like, I've been through many hard times in my life. I went through a divorce after that. I've gone through career changes, obviously, switching from HR to my career in fitness training. And now I'm working with people that have had GBS before. And so I'm helping them. And it's been really rewarding. But I always see people going back to this hard challenge that they're going through. And I think it's just continuously never giving up, no matter what, even if it means you need to take some breaks or rest and then get back at it again tomorrow.
I think that's amazing. You brought up a really important point. I didn't realize that you were divorced, Holly. And relationships really are impacted by these journeys that we're on. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So when after I got out of the hospital, I came to the realization I was a completely different person. I was 26, and then all of a sudden I felt like I was in my 70s. I felt like I had learned so much from that experience that I felt just so confident in myself, and I knew what I wanted, and I knew the things that I could go after. I wanted to better myself. I wanted to just go after everything that I knew that I deserved. And I realized that my relationship that I was in was extremely toxic. And I did my best to try to fix it for several years. But eventually it was, okay, I need to move on. And it's better for my daughter that we move on. And we have a wonderful relationship now. It's been 10 years since then, almost 11 years since I was diagnosed. But yeah, it definitely changes you as a whole.
Yeah, I found the same thing, but I found it hard because we go through the journey together, right? As a family, you go through the journey together, but you have such independent journeys and independent lessons. And I know myself on the other side of it, I had so many beautiful awakenings and so many lessons that I had learned. And I felt like I had grown so much, right? And I would get frustrated when perhaps the same precious time or the value in the gift of today perhaps wasn't recognized in the same way. The awareness of the fragility of life wasn't recognized, right? But we don't all experience that same journey. And I think we need to really recognize that. And I'm a big advocate because I think there should be more support in place for these young families like yours, like mine. There are no supports in place for our families. And our children deserve those supports in place to keep us together, right? Yes. They deserve these intact families. And I believe personally, had those supports been in place, that, you know, the lessons that I was learning could have been communicated a bit better. My husband, we could have been more as one with the lessons that we were learning and the paths that we were navigating together, but also independently, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so I really am a strong advocate for more support in place for these families of young sick parents, because there are truly none at hand. And these children have no supports and these spouses have no supports. We have a lot of support, right, as patients, but we don't have a lot of support for that family. And I think that's a really big missing void, because perhaps your husband also could have learned those same lessons, right? And you could have grown together on this journey had those supports been in place. But he had his own stressful existence and everything he had to conquer on the home front, right? And so we each have very different battles that we're fighting in trying to stay together and alive and everything all at the same time. But more support is definitely needed. Holly, this has been a gift. Gosh, risers and thrivers, I hope you've enjoyed today's show. I hope you enjoy all these takeaways. Find your inspirational role models. Create that safe space to feel all of the emotions that come in tow with hardship and adversity. Practice self-care, self-love, and believe in yourself that you can bounce back even higher, no matter what you are navigating today. There is no mountain too high that you cannot climb. Please reach out to Holly. Holly, how can my audience find you if they're interested in finding you?
So I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, I'm on YouTube. I'm new to TikTok, learning that one. But you can reach out to me on any one of those platforms or through my website, and you can shoot me an email, whatever works for you.
Holly's website is hollyaftergbs.com. And if you've only been lucky enough to see part of this show, you can catch the whole show once we upload it to all of the streaming platforms. That should be done by this time next week. So stay tuned. It'll be launched soon. And as always, it'll be the video you can watch on YouTube at Dr. Erica Harris. And I believe this will stay on Facebook for 24 hours. I'm not super sure, but try to catch it. All the best, risers and thrivers. We will have another great show for you next Tuesday. Join us live again at 1:00. All the best. Thanks again, Holly.
Thank you so much.
Have a great day, everyone.